Happy 2022, everyone. It is nice to see some friendly faces and some new faces that I look forward to meeting and learning about their journey into immersive technology and storytelling. This is for the Digital Hollywood now virtual conference that we were all going to do in fabulous Las Vegas in person, which is now largely turned into a virtual conference, and the dynamics of our changing world lead us to, I think, what will be an interesting conversation, because what we are doing right now has become more than just a passing fancy. It has become a necessity of day-to-day communication. And I think everybody here would probably agree with that. And we find ourselves on video chat in some way, shape, or form more than other forms of communication, largely because of the pandemic, and not that anybody here wants to make light of what is such a serious and continuing situation that we feel like in some ways we may never get out of, but hopefully we will, and hopefully we'll get back into some version of the real world. But the real world has changed, and this panel is to talk about media strategies from a group of leaders. So officially this is the Immersive Media Leadership Panel. I guess we would all be considered spokespeople in our field that have opinions according to where we all live together. So what I would like to do just to start off is let's all do a quick introduction of what we effectively do for a living and where we come from. I will wrap up last of the group here, since I'm sort of co-moderating and speaking today. It's sort of a dual role. So why don't we just do that? Why don't we just do our introductions, and then I'll ask the first question, which will interestingly be largely what in a normal panel would probably be the last question that we would ask. I'm going to ask it first and see how everybody reacts to it. So Natasha, why don't we start with you? Give us just a quick little background so people know who you are, where you come from.
Well, Ted, thanks for having and moderating this panel. My name is Natasha French. I started off my career actually as a journalist at CNN, so come from the media background, but then fell quickly into the tech space. So probably for the past 15 years have worked with a lot of AR and VR companies on the marketing and sales side. Most known in the space when I was the chief marketing officer of Ventana, where I helped launch interactive holograms, doing a lot of telepresence, where now it's really exciting, help launch their 3D and AR automation software, which, and then after Ventana, I started my own agency where I'm now working directly with AR and VR and XR companies to help bring their products to work with larger brands in the healthcare entertainment space, as well largely in the sports space as well.
Got it. Great. Okay, so you're going to be an interesting voice, since your day-to-day is in immersive and what we now refer to as XR media. Patrick, let's go to you next.
Hey everyone, Happy New Year. Great to see everyone. Sorry we might miss some of you in Vegas in person, but I will be there for a couple of days. So if any of you are there, it'd be lovely to meet you all for coffee or something. But I'm with Qualcomm. I'm the business development lead at Qualcomm for XR and gaming, and I've been with the company for 20 years. We've been investing in XR technologies for well over a decade. So not sure how a key technology enabler made it into a media panel, but I think of anyone at Qualcomm, I probably have one of the most media relevant experiences for the work I do here at Qualcomm. So I deal with a lot of OEMs, content providers, ISVs, IHVs, operators, anyone really who is dedicated to bringing up this XR ecosystem we're all trying to establish.
Excellent. And Patrick and I are very much thick as thieves. We are always working on something interesting together, and he'll be too modest to say it, but I'll say it for him. Qualcomm as a company are effectively one of the underpinnings of XR. They build the chipsets that largely power the bulk of the devices that we use on a daily basis that are sort of entering into the emerging space. So it's excellent to have you here. I think you'll be a very interesting voice in this. Stefano, let's move to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ted. So my name is Stefano Corazza. I'm the head of augmented reality at Adobe. By my background, and I studied in this industry is in animation and machine learning. I was a researcher at Stanford, and then I started Mixamo. A few years later, they got acquired by Adobe. And so all I do, day in, day out is like augmented reality, thinking about the ecosystem. We are developing tools. We are developing services. We are engaging with the community. As part of that, I'm also the founder of the Festival of the Impossible, which is an augmented reality art festival, and also an angel investor because I love connecting with entrepreneurs, especially on the in the early stage of things. And then if they do something that has to do with like 3D animated characters, then it's a magnet for me. I can't help it.
Excellent.
So that's my
perfect. And certainly Adobe is no stranger to all things about the advent of media and new platforms. So the fact that you're involved in it, that they have a day-to-day involvement in this speaks well for where we're headed as an industry, that they care about this. That it isn't all just about traditional screens for Adobe. So that's a good sign. Next, we'll go to my good friend Joanna, who I see smiling and always very nice to see.
Hi, Ted. Great to see you. Great to be here with everybody here virtually. I will not be live at Vegas, unfortunately, this year, but excited to catch up with everybody virtually and happy to have Zoom calls with, ad nauseam with everybody. So I am at HP. I'm the global head of VR go-to-market for HP. I've been there about 4 years. Prior to that, I was at NBC Universal for nearly a decade, leading marketing for some of the brands there. And I'm also an executive producer on immersive content, Finding Pandora X and Brianna's Garden.
Right. So we would say you are deep in this well. You are among the people that I have interfaced with in many events and many sort of through this whole cycle, starting kind of around 2013, 2014 to now when we sit in the early 2020s. You are an OG of VR and XR. So it's very nice to have you. And last but certainly not least, Christina, why don't you give us a little background on where you come to this from?
Sounds good, thanks. I'm Christina Serafim. I'm part of the Verizon Ventures team. And one of the areas that we have been heavily investing over the last several years and continue to focus on is immersive and metaverse. We have made some very interesting investments in companies like YBVR, FCF, Status Pro, and more to come and be announced. So I've worked very closely with our business units from both a technology perspective as well as content and applications perspective to identify companies and technologies that primarily focusing on investments in early stage startups. So anywhere from seed stage to Series B is really where my focus is. But of course, our various business units that are involved in the XR space have larger partnerships with companies like Ericsson and Adobe and others. So we are very excited. I continue to be excited and see some really interesting companies that are changing the world and that are emerging from the XR space.
Excellent. And I think it goes without saying that 5G is something we all believe is more than just an enabling technology. It's a core tenet of what we will do to advance this media space, with the idea of building devices that have to be light enough and nimble enough on our heads that we need to separate the weight components and the structural components and move some of that into the cloud, but have the ability to have enough low latency and enough high bandwidth and enough sort of stable bandwidth environments that this can work. So that's something we can probably get into throughout the next 30 or 40 minutes of our discussion here, because I know we probably all have opinions on that. So that rounds up our little group here. Last and maybe least in this realm, I am the futurist for Viacom CBS, which encompasses Paramount Pictures, where was my sort of previous roost, and now it has kind of grown to all of the Viacom CBS enterprises, which is MTV, Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, and all of CBS, CBS Sports, CBS News, CBS Primetime, all of that stuff. And it's my responsibility to kind of be the explorer, the guy that's always looking around, not just the next corner, but the next few corners, as to what the media experience means for a large entertainment organization. And that's what I do day in and day out. And so that's me in a nutshell. So I'm going to ask the questions, and I'll probably also participate in a little bit in the answers. But like I sort of forewarned you, the first question I thought we would ask to start this off, and maybe Joanna, we'd start with you, since you happen to be in the center of my Brady Bunch squares here.
I'm Alice.
Is your Alice, exactly. If we look at the decade ahead of us, right, which you've often heard me say, I very much spend time in this 10-year journey of whatever that 10 years might be. So now we're 2021 to 2022 to 2032. If we take the halfway marker and look at 2025, for all of you here, give us some thoughts, some overt thoughts about what you think is going to, the world at large is going to look like in this 5-year gap from where we sat starting in 2020 to 2025? Just as an overview as to see where we start our discussions today.
With regard to immersive tech.
Regards to whatever you think it should be valuable for whoever's watching this discussion, knowing that we're all involved in immersive technology and storytelling.
Yeah, I think, where we sit today. So, at HP, we're known for making computers. And in the VR world, we have made 4 different VR headsets to this point, as well as 3 different VR backpacks. So our headsets are all made with Microsoft with Windows Mixed Reality, and the last 2 were also made in partnership with Valve. So the HP Reverb G2 and the HP Reverb G2 Omnicept Edition. To this point, all of our headsets we've made are tethered, which means that they can have much higher resolution. So your graphics power can be much stronger. They have really great audio, and they tend to be more comfortable on your head because they're able to distribute the weight in a different way. So that's where we are today. And our Omnicept Edition has bioanalytics as part of it. So it has face tracking, it has pupillometry, it has heart rate tracking, and has eye tracking. At this point, that's still like unusual to have that in a headset. It's uncommon, and it's the first headset, that's really that intelligent headset that takes hardware plus software and then has applications built on top of it with our great partners. I think that's those types of that interaction where the headset is not just a device that beams information to you, but your information goes back to it through those intelligent sensors will be much more the norm at that point.
So what does 2025 look like in terms of, you're talking about sort of the most exotic parts of the headset ecosystem, right? Where people are using them for very advanced things. How does it change in 5 years, or does it sort of sit right where it is now, but just keeps evolving?
Well, Ted, obviously none of us can, these big companies can talk about like what we're actually doing on a roadmap that hasn't been announced. So we can only talk about it in broad sweeping generalizations, kind of like where we see the world going.
That's okay. Yep.
But so, I would say that type of technology, I think, will be integral and core to all types. It'll be, at this point, it's very special to have that and very incremental. And I think it will, at some point turn into table stakes, along in these years. I also think that, the goal of everyone to have the technology move faster, be smaller, be more comfortable. We will all be, the goal to approach that the technology looks like what Patrick's wearing today with, just like slightly larger. I don't think we'll be all the way there. Thank you, Patrick, for modeling that. But I think we'll be well on our way. And, we'll look back at what we're wearing today, as we do with those early mobile phones.
Right. Okay. So does anybody else have a thought process about the 2025 year, that marker in time that either agrees with Joanna as a slightly different point of view? Anybody else want to dive in there before I go into the sort of next thing?
Maybe I'll come with Ted, just because since Joanna brought up devices, I think if, and I agree with her, we got to be a little bit careful where we sit in the ecosystem. We get a lot of visibility over the horizon, but I'll speak kind of generically, if that's okay. The way we enable the market is we essentially take our silicon roadmap. We're now moving into custom silicon specifically for XR devices. As you know, we've been investing a lot in software, so that those perception algorithms that run and are so tightly coupled between the device and the experience. And then now at AWE, recently we announced Snapdragon Spaces, which is our move to enable the ecosystem with a developer-facing SDK, specifically for AR head-worn devices. So that SDK is going to be supporting Unity and Unreal. It's going to be OpenXR, so it's going to be open channels, Chronos compliant. And the goal here is to, in that 2025 timeframe, I think theoretically, the major platform guys should maybe be around on their second generation device at that time.
Right.
Our goal is to have a lot of consumer choice for AR head-worn devices at that time. We're in an interesting position because we can optimize everything on the headset. We still think it's going to be a wirelessly tethered architecture to a host compute device with some cloud compute functionality, but the devices may still be a little bit clunky. But I think, as Joanna pointed out, we're going to be taking weight and size out but at the same time increasing functionality.
But your vision, even across the next 5 years, is still device tethered to the smartphone as the brain for the most part until we get, so it'll be beyond 2025 when we really see an all-in-one device that's sort of fully nimble enough to move past the smartphone age. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's very complex alchemy to get that, when you combine that fashion and technology to get the form factor we need with the right battery life and the right functionality. So we think we're going to be wireless. There's no doubt about it, but it will be a wireless tethered with a host compute device. We think, until that about 2025 timeframe.
Got it. So Christina, as we talk about, sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
I was just saying there will be exceptions. Not everyone's going to take the same approach, but that's the ecosystem play that we're looking to enable in the next 5 years.
Right. And Christina, as Joanna and Patrick bring up the device part of this, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about the network effect over the next 5 years and what that might look like from a consumer standpoint, what we might expect from the capabilities of what you and some of the other giant telecommunications companies are putting forth these days?
Yeah, no, I think that we've already seen the impact of the 5G technology, for example, as a way to accelerate the adoption of both the hardware as well as the software side, to accelerate the adoption because it improves the experience with the ultra fast speeds and reduced lag time. Really, I think from a consumer perspective, if you look at some of these technologies, both the hardware and the software have been around for some time, but without that connectivity, it was not the type of experience that consumers wanted to embrace because it was lagging or there was not a comfort level that we wanted to see. And I think that we're really just seeing the beginning of this impact. I mean, if we're looking at 5 years out, we really are looking at the more massive adoption of not just with the rollout of 5G, but the rollout of 5G affecting the massive adoption of both device and software and applications. We're seeing that in education, in music, in healthcare. I think we're seeing that impact on both the adoption as well as the revenue that accompanies that adoption. And then if we're looking at, we all know it takes 10 plus years ahead of time to start developing the next networking technology. So 10 plus years out, probably it's the evolution of 5G to 6G technologies with even further impact on that experience and the reduced speeds and latency. So I think
you're not staying in place here. You are always looking at what's coming next as a company. It's interesting.
Well, absolutely. I mean, not from the venture team perspective, we are focusing also on identifying partner startups that are utilizing this networking technology. But obviously, our counterparts, our R&D teams within the networking team are working on the next gen, both on implementing 5G and really optimizing that adoption and rollout, as well as figuring out the next level, which is 6G.
Got it. So let's lead that into Stefano, because as someone that came from the startup world and then was absorbed and brought in to a very, very large organization, Adobe, which has all kinds of creative outlets, your opinion on where the next 5 years might lead to for a company like Adobe as it needs to support and bolster up this growing ecosystem around things that would not be considered traditional screen use cases.
Yeah, thank you. And I can kind of close the arc because we started with the hardware, now network, and I can talk a little bit maybe about software. Everybody is asking like, what's gonna be like the killer app of AR? Okay, let's say in 5 years the glasses are out, 100 million people are using them. What's the killer app? And sometimes we forget that for the for the phone, the killer app was being able to like check your email on your phone, which was like mind blowing at the time, right? And so sometimes is something that is a little bit more meta than let's say, oh, it's going to be the next Pokemon Go. And so my take there is like in 5 years, there will be at least the innovators, 100 million people in the world wearing those AR glasses. Yes, the power will come mostly from the phone, probably at the beginning. And then the first killer app will be just about visualization, because when we will go back and try to look at things and experience and 3D content on a phone, we will all feel a sense of like, almost like we will feel claustrophobic, right? Using this 20 degrees field of view instead of the 140 that we have. And then the other aspect I think that is going to be a major unlock for augmented reality is AI. The level of progress the startup world is making around like virtual personal assistants or digital companions, how we want to call them, is pretty incredible. And I think at the end, people are trying to figure out what is going to be like the user interface when AR arrives and we are all wearing, headset or glasses. Well, the easiest user interface for humans is talking to other humans, as opposed to figuring out buttons and menus. And so I think AI will bring that back, where we will all have like our own virtual personal assistant. They will be our mediating agent with all the complexity and the technology of the digital world and augmented reality. And that is what we will be interfacing with. And that virtual person will understand context, will understand where we are, will understand our needs. It will be probably the main mediating factor between us and the world, the digital world around us. So I think that's our take, and that's why Adobe is 100% focused today in creating the tool the creatives can use to build those experiences, build those like digital companions, make them smart to understand the world, to understand all the geo tagging around us. And basically that's the main goal. And we want this to be democratized as much as possible. Our mission is creativity for all. So we are trying to create those tools where you don't need to program, you don't need to write code, but anybody-ish, and in the future, anybody truly will be able to do that.
Good. And we're actually going to dive into that a little more in a moment with the terminology that we will not be able to get away from, which you all know that's coming. It starts with an M. But before we do that, Natasha, let's give you the final word on this 2025 perspective. And I came to you last because you are the one out of this group that is most largely dealing with companies that are looking to find their XR strategy, right? And build into that over the next at least 5 years, if not longer. So let's give you the final word on that.
No, for sure. So like in 2012, when we were pitching holograms, people thought it was the hologram on the baseball card, right? So you think we've come almost 10 years and that's having its own rebirth, where people didn't understand when we were telling them, oh, we can telepresent you via 5G. And I think the biggest thing over the past 2 years has been adoption, right? With the web AR, especially, consumers are now getting it. It's all here right on our phone. And I always looked at it when I was telling it, it's storytelling. It went from newspapers to internet to now you're telling stories through different mediums. And I think the most exciting thing I see is going to be the one thing we sometimes forget. We live in this world every day. And sometimes I just ask someone on the street, do you know what VR is? Do you know what AR is? Right. You sometimes forget, someone might not know that. Right.
Yep.
So the adoption has grown. And I think in that 5 years from now, because people are now getting it, the excited thing I'm really excited about is the fact there's going to be more content in these different mediums. So from the phone to the headsets. And then the thing is also, we have to remember consumers want to be a part of that story, and to enable them to be a part of that story even more now by customizing the experience through these different lighter weight headsets, or whether it's through mobile, it will increase that adoption. So I think we'll definitely see more of it across, but also for different channels to speak to each other will really help brands adopt, because the brand is the one who has to take the risk and invest in the technology. And now that they're adopting, I'm excited to see that brands are willing to take more risks when it comes to using these new mediums.
Right. Excellent. Okay. So that kind of starts off with everybody's comfort zone, right? This is what you do, what you know, where you are. Now I want to ask some things that may spark some interesting conversation and debate. And when we talk about XR broadly, which encompasses mixed reality, virtual reality, all these sort of newfangled forms of entertainment, socialization, productivity, these days you cannot get away from the word the metaverse and what a broad topic it is and how it is effectively the evolution of what we've always been doing once we got on the wires, once we figured out how to do things around communication that were largely, you know, sort of modernistic tools that we called the internet, right? Now we're evolving that into something that looks like it's going to be even more immersive and even more compelling, which largely leads us to a story around virtual reality, mixed reality, or broadly the XR field. So I don't really want to go over sort of the broad topics of the metaverse. I think that's already been done to death and there's lots of other panels, but I want to ask you all a question about how all these large, medium, and small companies and the startups are going to tackle with what we refer to as the walled garden effect. So if the metaverse, and I know you all are up on this because you all play a part in your company that has to deal with it, if the metaverse is designed to be a place that is open and transportable and have the ability to move goods and services and identities and use cases across different companies' value chains and what they bring to the world, how do we tackle with the idea of companies needing to make a profit, report to their stockholders, and keep things within their garden, within the world of their ecosystem, as opposed to an open ecosystem? So that's kind of a much more sparky question, the first one, but I'm very curious whoever wants to dive in first there and take a shot at that. Did I scare everybody off? Patrick, come on, you've got to have some opinion on this because you have to deal with all these customers that are building devices, right?
All right, I'll take a crack. Yeah, you know, obviously it's a hot topic, right? And nobody knows how this is going to evolve and all the different, you know, corporate interests. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Obviously, you have a lot of companies investing billions of dollars here for a reason because you know they see opportunity. So, and then the discussion between, hey, in the current iteration of the internet, what works well, what doesn't work well, how can we take these lessons and what we want to change and apply them to Internet 3.0 or metaverse, whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it. So the whole question of, is it going to be a centralized model or is it going to be a decentralized model, and what technologies come to play to make that a reality? Obviously, you know, DeFi, you know, blockchain is right up front, is an enabling technology. We see it, I think, first enmeshing itself in sort of the gaming worlds today. You know, NFTs are definitely already almost like a de facto staple of how digital goods get owned and transferred within games today. That's bringing a whole new wave of people, a whole new market into the crypto world, and I think that's going to advance the metaverse and then flow into other, you know, non-gaming sectors. So that's going to be interesting to see how that decentralized mentality sort of influences the evolution of where we're going with metaverse, and I think that's going to be something that's going to be very powerful to watch. So,
Stefano.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Stefano, from Adobe's standpoint, you must have an opinion on the openness and or maybe not so openness of what we're headed towards next.
Yeah, I think there's like a huge bifurcation, and those two scenarios could, you know, both exist. But one is the one that you were referring to. So companies trying to create their own walled garden, trying to lure people in, you know, either because they want to sell products or services, and then try to harvest as much revenue off them as they can, and then try to make it as hard as possible to migrate to another walled garden, right? So that's kind of a little bit the dystopian, if you want, way where you're gonna have like 25, you know, logins into these metaverses. They all trying to, you know, lure you in some form. The opposite scenario is the one that I think is more tied to AR versus VR, which is the walled garden doesn't exist because it's actually the real world around you. That's where all the content lives. And when you go and like enter like a mall or like an amusement park or like an art exhibition, there's no way people are going to like log into something, right? The content is going to already live there. It's going to be triggered by images, by geolocation, by a 3D object that my phone is scanning without me even realizing. And so at that point, like the real world will force everybody to play in the same playground, basically, if you want to. And so I think those will be like the two different directions. It's hard to know. I mean, I'm betting on the second one because it's more free and less isolating of people, and it's actually trying to make the world a better place. But I think both will exist and coexist and maybe cross-pollinate to some extent. And then maybe the more like open, real-world anchored AR metaverse will force the VR metaverse to also be more open in the long run, because otherwise it will be hard to compete for attention and for eyeballs. So that's kind of how we see it, and it's gonna be really fun. You know, we are gonna through the like American Online phase of this, right? And then we're gonna look back and be like, oh, who thought this was gonna hold water? I mean, of course, people, you know, blew it up, right? And definitely, I agree with Patrick. It's gonna go towards a more decentralized type of architecture.
Yeah, I think that's my generalized opinion as well. But I'm constantly worried about these very large companies with profit motives that are going to disallow that to really take place. Natasha, you must have clients that are dealing with this and grappling with this every minute of every day, right? So you might have.
Yeah, because we look what kind of would happen with those larger companies not opening up, right, for people to create content on their platform. They didn't adopt. And now you're looking, especially in the retail space, if you're buying something in one area and you want to, you know, I've heard gamers who purchase a Balenciaga jacket and now want to import that into their other game that they're to wear that, right? You know, there has to be that openness to enable it, I think, to succeed, just kind of seeing the struggles, because you can invest a lot and a brand can make something in one world and then you're gonna have to go reinvent it for it to exist somewhere else. So where we're trying to look at is, I have clients who they're looking for what platform will enable them to play in many and diversify where their content can live. And I think that's going to be really important as we look at it, because I would hope that we're creating all these great things, but you're not giving people access to it. I think that's really what inhibits anyone from really enjoying it and truly making it succeed. So that's where that's where my stance is.
And that would lead me very logically to a company like Verizon that must have a stance on how to, you know, make profit and suit their own interests, but keep things open and distributed and allow everybody to access, right? So, Christina, you must have a sense of an opinion on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it is really providing that ubiquitous connectivity to all platforms that enable experiences. Although for example, my interaction with a lot of startups and growing startups, that I think at this stage, there is a little bit of a market share grab, and there is a little bit of that walled gardens build within some of these growing startups that are enabling platforms that have started to see some success. But I do think that eventually, for the sake of their scalability, as well as the market overall, there has to be that interoperability and sharing across the platforms. I just think that that's just the natural evolution that we haven't seen just yet.
So you believe it'll organically come as it matures, as what we're doing matures?
I think so. And I think if we reflect that to some of the prior examples in platforms that are not necessarily XR platforms, but that have taken that evolution, right, one would assume that the same dynamic will eventually happen.
And if I can just add on this, and it's not going to happen just easily, right? There are companies like Adobe. We are pouring an enormous amount of resources to make that vision happen. And sometimes we see the evil forces out there, you know, and we try to like fight them, or we try to just create, you know, common grounds between different walled gardens. And so it's going to take a lot of effort, but I think there's going to be a lot of people very motivated to do it, because it's the good fight, you know, and that feeling is a force multiplier. So we believe in that.
Great. Okay, so let me dovetail that into the next sort of thing I wanted to run past you. And first, just by a show of hands,
Hold on.
Oh, you have something to add, Patrick? Yeah.
I know we all want to hear what the futurist has to say on that.
You want to hear what I have to say about that? So
Give us your 30 seconds.
I do think a lot about that. My opinion is aligned very much with what you're saying. I think that what I study sort of backwards into forwards is ease of operation, ease of transportability, and ease of achieving what you want to achieve inside whatever platform you want to be in, right? So the big thing is if you want to socialize with other people, like one of the big frustrations for me personally is all the different messaging tools that are out there and how they're not really all that interop, right? So if I'm dealing with a bunch of folks from Asia and we're all on WhatsApp together and someone wants to send me a note, at some point, do I want that to link to my other text clients or not, right? And how many text clients do I need open at the same time to be able to access all of them? So the idea of a universal sign-on is an interesting thing. And I think both Apple and Google and Facebook have attempted that, but in a walled garden approach, right? Where you can choose all three of them, or you can choose any one of them. And you can say, I want to just use, one-click Apple to sign in, one-click Google to sign in, but then they're dropping you into their world and they're not allowing it to actually be open to other worlds. So what I'm hoping will happen over the next 5 to 10 years is that the realization of what Christina sort of brought up is it's going to be actually mandated by the customer base that you will choose how open you want your platform to be and how many ways you want people to find you and connect to you on whatever preferred platform you're on, right? So like we're using Zoom right now, but if we were using Teams or Facebook or Skype, someone couldn't just join our conversation. But if we wanted that, if we wanted the real world of the idea that, oh, someone's over there, there's Bob, let's see if he wants to come in and chat with us. We can't just bring him in if he's on another client. But it would be a really interesting thing to experiment with of giving permissions for I'm open to other platforms to come and join me on this platform or vice versa, right? It's a very difficult thing. It's a head scratcher as to how to, because there's technical challenges to actually accomplishing this, which is part of why those walled gardens exist. Is not just for profit, it's for functionality. It's for the ability to actually allow it. So as we all dive into mixed reality as our next sort of big platform, and we're going to move off traditional screens, how is that going to affect us? And how smart are we going to be as a group of companies and an ecosystem to try and figure this out? So does that kind of answer the question a little bit, Patrick? It's a challenging one.
Perfectly. I didn't mean to mess up your moderator mojo.
No, it's good. It's making it even more challenging for me, which is okay. But it actually leads into the next discussion. So by a show of hands, who here has an avatar? Who here has built an avatar or a couple of avatars? Okay, so everybody except for Christina. Okay, so Christina, we got to get you on the bandwagon. And are your avatars kind of a cartoon representation of themselves? Does any of you have a photorealistic avatar, like an actual full photo avatar that kind of actually looks like you yet? I have a couple of those because of what I do for a living. I thought Joanna, you might have one as well. So the question, maybe we start with Joanna on this one, is do you believe that an avatar culture is coming where it will be extraordinarily important to have an avatar or multiple avatars for different things that you do, for your professional life avatar, your gaming avatar, your social and friend avatar? Do you think it should all be just one unified one? And how critical do you think it is for the next couple of years for people to actually build an embodiment of themselves that can move past what we're doing right now with just a 2D video?
Yeah, well, I was going to start by saying I think at some level we already have that, even if it's just in 2D. So your whole social media life in some way is a representation of you. It's an avatar of you. It may or may not be your real pictures in some cases, or maybe already a cartoon version of you, and then certainly is the you that you want to show the world in social media already. So I think we're already steps towards that, even in 2D. So that's where I would start. But I think a whole bunch of different questions in there. I think I don't think that I think it's doubtful that we'll end up with just one. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, that would mean that the all of the decentralization worked and there are no walled gardens.
Right.
So, so I guess that would be that, if that was actually, if that came to pass, then that could be one version of that. But it feels like will probably, even if there's a lot of decentralization, there'll still probably be some worlds that may choose to be walled off. And then the other part of that, the question of will people have, one for different things? I think that's part of, I think that people, the customers, the audiences will vote and decide which different ones they want to have, and put things on and off the way that we do in the real world. Some days you feel like a unicorn, some days you feel like a microwave, some days you feel like yourself but with purple hair. Some days, so I think that, but I definitely recommend that people play, start playing around with different avatars. It's fun, and it's fun to embody different characters at different moments.
Anybody else have a thesis or opinions or thoughts around their avatar world, their avatar life?
Yeah, we'd love to add to that. So at Mixon, we built 2 avatar systems. One became Adobe Fuse, and then I just invested in this amazing company called Ready Player Me. That basically is you guys probably have heard, is a character creator for the metaverse that the people can incorporate into their game or metaverse for free. So I feel super strongly about this, and I've seen like a number of attempts in the past, I would say failed for many reasons. It takes about 6 to 12 months to build an avatar system. It's extremely complicated. But despite that, every game company used to build their own because it was such a big piece of the game or the metaverse or their identity. And I think now we are finally at a point where the technology is becoming so flexible and powerful that actually you can have an underlying infrastructure and then plug in the content that looks like your game should look like, right? And so I think we also have crossed in many ways the uncanny valley. Back then only cartoon avatars will hold because the semi-photorealistic ones were just super creepy. And I think now with the evolution of game engines, we can get to a place where like hair does look like hair, and also these avatars actually can have meaningful like eye motion, so they don't look like zombies. So the evolution of technology has made it so that I think it's possible to have this global interoperability where I can have my own digital identity and I can take it in and out of different metaverses. Right. And once that reaches critical mass, it will force every metaverse to allow the import-export flow. Otherwise, you're going to be there like, oh, to be part of this metaverse, you have to give up your own digital identity for which you have invested a lot of time and money. It's just not going
to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I believe that. I think that's largely correct, and that's an interesting. The reason why I asked the 1-2 question about the walled gardens and then into the avatar is your thesis is similar to my thesis, that when you have such bought in on your identity and your avatar, you are going to want that to move from place to place, and you will disallow companies that don't allow you to easily bring your identity or your multiple identities in and out of that. I know we have about like 5, maybe 6 or so minutes left. So Natasha, did you want to add something?
Yeah, well, first it's interesting when you think about the avatar, it might be one I create that I might not, another personality I bring right to that world. So it might be, I'm in real life, I'm not going to add this to myself, but in my avatar, I can live kind of a different, more maybe adventurous life or something, which I think is exciting for a lot of people to explore. My client actually last year, we built an AR bobblehead avatar, and it's really in the sports. And the cool thing about this, it's your face. And then you can pick movements. So what we're working on now is so it has in-game reaction. So if your player on a football team scores, your avatar will actually like cheer. But you can pick heads, a color, pick a different headwear. And it's actually been fun right now, though it lives in an app, right? So it's for a brand or for a team. But what we're trying to work on is how do we take that beyond and make it interactive so you can invite friends. And so, because it gets boring when it's just living alone, right, with your avatar.
Yep.
So that I think that evolution of it and more custom, I'll see more of those avatars because it's fun. And then it's kind of a brand affiliation that you can sense whether with a team or with a brand that you love.
Yeah, it's good. All right. So with just a couple minutes left, I'm going to throw out something just for like a little bit of a speed round. And Patrick, you mentioned it earlier. In addition to all these other pieces and parts that we talked about this new ecosystem that's building up with things like the words like metaverse and avatars and so forth and so on, the other big buzzword is NFT, right? Non-fungible token and what that means. So very quickly, round table wise, flash in the pan, meaningful, unbelievably hyper meaningful. Like what are your opinions around the world of what's happening with that, the tokenization of digital goods and objects? Christina, why don't you go first for us?
I don't know if I'm the best one to go first on this one, but what I do find really interesting as specifically for instance, some of our portfolio companies have launched NFTs, and I think it's an amazing ecosystem that's developing, and how I see it in terms of performance impact on some of our investments is that it creates an entire new revenue stream and essentially an entire new product and revenue stream that's almost as big as the core business that we initially invested in. And I see more and more of the companies going in that direction. So I'm really excited to see.
So you don't think it's a flash in the pan? You think it's real and it's going to hold and it's going to be meaningful?
I think it's going to hold and it's going to be meaningful in some capacity. I think it may not be, I personally, this is my personal opinion, it seems like that the dynamic around, it's going to be a marketplace like any other. So it's going to ultimately level out, and some areas of the marketplace are going to be established as more valuable and meaningful as opposed to others. And right now it seems like a little bit of randomness and confusion because it's so new and evolving.
Right. I think we've got like maybe 2 more minutes. Anybody else want to dive in on the NFT belief structure? Yes, no, maybe?
And I will add just a continuation on the avatar side of things. So NFTs is a way where avatar system can monetize. Mm-hmm. And it's really like an enabling factor because it allows companies to give the technology out for free. So in the Ready Player Me example, the SDK is completely free. That's why they got this massive adoption, because then the monetization is pushed back on the content and basically tracked to NFTs. So I think it's just creating a new monetization that is just going to enable a lot of the infrastructure to be passed on to the metaverses, the games, and the experiences very easily. So very happy that exists, and Adobe is very active in that field with an initiative called content authenticity. So we are, given that a lot of our tools are used to create that content, we are helping the ecosystem track it down so that they can also mint NFTs, and then people know where it's coming from.
Great. Well, I think, unless anybody has any other last salient words of wisdom, Patrick, you have something to want to add?
No, just double, triple vote for hyper meaningful on NFTs.
On the NFT front, you think it's a real thing? It's not just a flash in the pan. Yeah,
Did anyone think flash in the pan on the panel?
No, we think it's all real. We think it's meaningful.
Yeah,
it's exactly. It's migrating from what only existed in the real world. Now things can exist in the digital world that have provenance, that can actually be represented as have real value, that are tied to the blockchain, and they're going to be meaningful. Our company is involved in this. I know every big entertainment company is involved in it in some fashion now. So we're all tracking into the future. And that is probably a good way to sort of close out our little discussion today. There'll be more of these in the future. Victor has a whole litany of panels and discussions on all kinds of things related to the future of media. So please listen to the rest of these talks. And thank you all for joining us. And thanks to the terrific panelists that were able to help me round this 45 minutes out. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ted.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Vegas, for those of you.